The King of the Battlefield Chapter 71. Many changes occurred while Myung was away from his territory. Under Baltan's direction, wooden buildings were built and they earned necessary items from exploring the dungeon. Although there were less than 100 people, they were united for survival. They might have had the thought that they needed to figure out how to survive by themselves. There was no other choice. Irene placed her leather armor on a drying rack with the most sunlight as she shook her head. She needed to prepare for the worst-case scenario when the Lord didn't return. They were able to protect the village to a certain degree with the undead left beside by the man, but she couldn't be certain that this would continue. Also, there was no way to know when a strong monster would invade the village. These factors made the people worry. Although this did help provide motivation to be united, that was only a desperate struggle to live. Irene looked at Baltan standing firmly in front of the entrance of the village. Baltan. He hovered between life and death after being poisoned by a murloc. But, he became a knight of the Lord the next day. However, Irene knew the truth which the village people were unaware of. Baltan died. Irene was the first to notice that Baltan was dead. But when the Lord returned, Baltan's consciousness came back to life. When Baltan reopened his eyes, he became more quiet and stronger. Incomparable to the past. She thought he might have been turned into an undead, but his memories were still intact. His attitude towards other people, including Irene, didn't change greatly. He desperately tried to protect the village and even risked his life for the people. It was clearly different from the time when Heidegger became a completely different person. Are you really Baltan? A question she couldn't bear to ask. Even now, when few weeks had gone by, she wasn't able to ask him this one question. She couldn't find the right timing and had kept delaying it. Irene tightly bit her lips. Today, she was going to ask for sure. However, as expected, she couldn't ask him. This time, it wasn't due to an internal factor but an external factor. The village, move it. Then your lives will be saved. 15 lizardmen came to the village. The ones that walked on 2 feet with the face and the body of a lizard. They looked around the village with greedy eyes. It seemed like the newly created buildings stimulated the greed of the lizardmen. Baltan, who was guarding the entrance, slowly placed his hands on his waist. Swoosh! Baltan held his sword up high and sliced off a lizardman's head. Grr! The lizardmen bared their teeth. The claws that seemed like they could pierce through everything became longer and their heads turned red. It meant that they were prepared for combat and that it was impossible to settle this with words. Thud! Thud! However, half of them fell to the floor before they made their move. The undead hidden inside the shadows. It was because the Avengers whom Myung left behind appeared behind the lizardmen. Kaya! The rest of the lizardmen shook their bodies and started to attack. While I'm here, no monsters will invade our territory. Baltan and the undead fought against the lizardmen as if they were a single entity. The guardian of the territory, Baltan. Through Myung, he was born again and was specialized in defending. The problem started the following day. The fact that these lizardmen weren't the only ones. You guys are confined. I will slowly starve you to death. The next day, the one that introduced itself as the Lizardman King appeared. It was a huge monster at least twice the size of other lizardmen and brought 500 lizardmen to the village with him. Did they need to thank them for not pouncing on them from the start? After the Lizardman King left, the expressions of everyone in the village stiffened. Damn it, they are telling us to just die. What should we do? With just us, we won't be able to handle so many. The lizardmen have very keen senses. If they are determined, it would be hard to leave the village. First, let's try to find the people who can fight against the lizardmen. We can't just stand here and suffer. However, they didn't give up. They didn't have a way to run away either. This was the demon god's territory. A land too barren for them to live on. Another fight began and Baltan continued to show off his abilities. Cry of the Guardian. The effect that increased the toughness of allies, which made people think more realistically. They divided themselves into groups. First, people who could fight one-on-one with the lizardmen formed a group, and the rest were divided up into supporting roles according to their abilities. The lizardman king tried to create disunity by frightening them, but everyone cooperated even more than before. They couldn't just lose the sanctuary they finally gained. Let's think of a way. Let's make a trap. We have the murloc's poison. We still have some leather left. Don't you think we can plan some sort of disguise tactic with them? Since they don't seem like they will invade us right now, let's work the fastest we can. The Lizardman King's scheme wasn't going as he had planned. Abnormal for monsters, he was playing mind games, but that actually gave them an opportunity. If he suddenly charged in with 500 monsters, they wouldn't have been able to hold them off and would have been annihilated instantly. However, now that they had a day, they had the chance to make a last-ditch effort. Kaik. The next day, 100 lizardmen raided the village. However, no matter how keen the lizardmen's senses were, they couldn't avoid the skillfully made traps. As they stepped inside the village, 10 lizardmen were trapped inside holes or were poisoned by a strong poison. And arrows rained down. Ting! Ting! However, the skin of the lizardmen was tough. There was no way for a wooden arrow to pierce through them. The lizardmen flicked their tongue. Although they were skillfully made traps, if they experienced it once, the story changed. They concentrated on the ground to avoid the traps. Arrows? They didn't care. If they were careful of their eyes, they thought they wouldn't be afflicted. However, that relaxing attitude didn't last long. Blaze! Suddenly, the normal arrows were changed to flaming ones. Quickly! Quickly roll the oil tanks! Like we practiced, roll the oil tanks to the places we've designated. The oil they extracted from murloc corpses had many uses in everyday life. However, they were also useful in defending the village. Kiruk! Kiruk! As their surroundings were instantly covered with fire, the lizardmen became flustered. It wouldn't be easy for them to overcome their instinctive fear of fire. In reality, there were a few lizardmen that were painfully being burned to death. Now is the time. Attack! Now! Bolton didn't lose this chance. Around 50 people held their own weapons and started to attack the lizardmen. Most of them were weapons Lord Muyong left behind, but they weren't bad. At least, they were enough to pierce through the scales of the lizardmen. Slash! Clash! All kinds of battle sounds filled up all around them. As their spirits collapsed, the lizardmen ran about in confusion. Shortly after, they started to run away in retreat. The people cheered as they raised their weapons up high. We won! Don't ever come back, you damn lizards! Kayak! Tui! Victory was always sweet. As the people were drunk with that word, they shouted out their feelings, embraced each other and danced. However, they couldn't always feel the sweetness of victory. There were about 500 lizardmen in total. Even if they reduced their numbers by a few tens, they were still over 400 left. And as the numbers slowly increased and they were getting used to their tactics, people were getting nervous. Even though they were still holding on, people secretly knew that they would be at their limit soon. Is there no way? Late at night, Irene was preoccupied. Like this, it will be difficult. We won't last long. It wasn't just the lizardmen that died. More than 10 people had died already. It was obvious that within time, the rate of deaths would increase. However, no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't think of a way to solve this. I'm powerless. Irene hung her head. She could only guard the entrance, make traps, and use a bow. At most, 2 people's worth of work. With just that, she couldn't turn the current situation around. At that moment, Bolton, who was sitting with a few men near a fire, stood up from his spot. Bolton! The enemies are here. Enemies! Zing! Zing! Irene quickly shook the small bell-shaped item on her neck. It was an item she earned from the Murloc dungeon, and if she shook it, it would produce a loud sound. The people who were asleep hastily gathered. About 70 in total. However, everyone was completely exhausted. It was because, for the last 3 days, they weren't able to sleep well. A lot of enemies. Stand by. However, Bolton didn't order for them to attack unlike before. Soon, hundreds of red eyes sparkled in the darkness. In the middle, the Lizardman King showed its huge presence. It finally came. Damn it! People clicked their tongues bitterly. Their only hope was for it to make a miscalculation. However, it seemed like that last hope disappeared. About 400 lizardmen and 70 villagers. There was no need to compare who would out on top. Their only choice was to negotiate. Bolton walked forward with heavy steps. Lizardman King, face me one-on-one. Let's end this as representatives from each side. This was their only option. For Bolton and the Lizardman King to fight. Of course, the probability was very small. Bolton could hold him off for a long time as his stamina was high, but it wouldn't lead him to victory. N.O. Thump. However, it even refused to talk. The Lizardman King lifted its tail and smacked Bolton. Bolton's body lifted up into the air and crashed down near them. Bolton. Irene went to look after Bolton, but he raised his hand and stood up from his spot. She could feel his will to protect the people and the village until the end. Irene burst out into tears as she watched him. Bolton, it's too difficult. From the start, this was a fight we couldn't win. If they were a bit stronger. This was also something that had occurred because they weren't strong. If they had strength, the lizardmen wouldn't have been able to threaten them. For survival, they combined their strength, but this was their limit. To be honest, you could say they were amazing to hold them back for this long. But, Bolton shook his head. No, we can win. What do you mean we can win? How? He's here. He? Bolton was looking towards a faraway place. Following Bolton's gaze, Irene turned her gaze towards the location and immediately, her body shivered. You would have to call it ghastly. Chills ran down her spine. A fierce dusty wind blew, and from afar, many things were approaching. Lizardmen were able to feel it as well. They turned their heads and couldn't help but stiffen their bodies. Before they knew it, tens of thousands of Dakibas had encircled the lizardmen. And in the center, a person who Irene was familiar with appeared. Ah! She now realized who he was. At least at that moment, she couldn't be happier to see him. The lord who left them had returned. Within the darkness, his eyes were sparkling with an especially red shine. What are you lizards up to? The lizardman didn't reply. That was why Myung spoke coldly. Kill them. Has ordered us. Kill all lizardmen. As the blue skin-colored Duoxini yelled, about 20,000 Dakibas started to move. A massacre occurred afterwards. No other words were necessary. The Lizardman King felt that the situation was dangerous as the Dakibas suddenly barricaded them from behind. King, of Dakibas. Fight me, one-on-one. No. Swoosh. Anguish made a quiet sound. From his body, thousands of black specters soared out. Everyone trembled at the sight. In just 1 month, the Lord returned as a king. Chapter 72. As soon as he sliced off the head of the Lizardman King, a long message appeared. It seemed like the King Slaughterer skill effect had activated, since it was a monster with ruler qualifications. Strength 5. Not bad. Actually, it was surprising. Furthermore, not a supporting stat but a pure stat was increased. Myung stretched out his hand and held the spirit of the Lizardman King. It's a pity they can't be repeated. It meant that if he was to kill another Lizardman King, it wouldn't be counted. Myung looked at the Duoxini Sahun for a second, then turned his head. The underworld. There was an uncountable number of monster species. And dioxines, like Sahun, were necessary to keep the Dakibus under control. It was foolish to take action. By the way, Lord Quest. Muyong frowned at that part. Occasionally, there were times when an associated achievement appeared when you solved a specific trial. And when all associated achievements were completed, an enormous reward was given. The Lord Quest he received this time meant that if he killed 100 different types of kings, a reward depending on the grade of the content would be given. In the name of In the name of It was a very memorable scene to see 20,000 Dakibus crushing the lizardmen. From the beginning, lizardmen weren't high-rank monsters. So, they couldn't overturn the absolute difference in numbers. As if it was obvious, the fight simply ended in an instant and Muyong returned to his territory as if nothing happened. "Greetings, Lord." Bolton was the first to kneel. Everyone else started to kneel, following Bolton's actions. However, everyone's faces were filled with curiosity, astonishment, and nervousness. They were curious as to where and how he gained this many Dakibus and were scared they might be harmed. Muyong calmly spoke. "From now on, these Dakibus will also be the citizens of this land. Try to get along with each other." Surprise spread on the faces of those who heard his words. To get along with Dakibus. Even more, there were tens of thousands. However, Muyong didn't speak any further. That was the end of his explanation. They need to develop quickly. The words of placed quite a strong power on the Dakibus. If they were told to die, they wouldn't really die, but they would at least pretend to act something similar to that. Since he had already warned them numerous times, there was no worry that the Dakibus would attack the humans. He was worried how 20,000 Dakibus would be able to settle down in this land. If they didn't handle the job swiftly, they would only walk the path of self-destruction. This was Demon God's land. You could only earn what you wanted through struggles. They needed to cooperate with each other to live. "First, I need to suppress the surrounding monsters." Muyong nodded as he entered the village. 20,000 Dakibus settled near the village, but as they lacked the infrastructure, it was hard to even call it a settlement. To stabilize the land and for the Dakibus to settle, there was a need to tidy up the surrounding monsters. Strong monsters don't live within a few kilometers of this place. With Bolton and Irene leading the way, start suppressing the nearby monsters. The two were familiar with surrounding land. If the Dakibus weren't careful, they might stir up a hornet's nest, so Bolton and Irene would only lead them to prevent that. The rest of the 5,000 Dakibus move the materials and build homes. Also, help the humans increase the size of the field. And there was another problem he needed to take care of. There wasn't a lot of food stored up. They could make it work temporarily by hunting, but there was a limit to that. Heidegger had cultivated a small field to produce crops, but Muyong was planning to increase the size to prepare for the future. It would take some time, but since he had already decided, he was planning on setting up proper foundations. Following Muyong's orders, 20,000 Dakibus moved busily. The people who were hesitant at first started to help the Dakibus and were adapting to the new situation. And not long after. Once the Dakibus had completely adjusted with the village, it resulted in a steep increase in his rank. Muyong rubbed his chin. Lord points. Lords were able to use these points and exchange them for all sorts of things. Compared to them, he was still lacking, but it seemed like he could continue to receive the points since there were many areas that still needed to be developed. Depending on how the Lord uses their points, the structure of their territory changes. However, he needed to use the Lord points carefully. Besides building castles and buildings, there were a lot more uses for the points. For example, hiring guardians to protect the territory, establishing knights, purchasing a marble of territory, etc. It could also be used to get the most important shrine. There were few different types of shrines, and depending on the god they worshipped, the content also changed. However, when they set up a shrine, believers would also appear. From what he knew, a blessing would also be given to the territory and the invasions of monsters would decrease. To get a shrine, I need at least 2,000 points. He slightly clicked his tongue. And he turned his head after observing his territory that was slowly developing. Dear husband, is something concerning you? There is a needless name attached. A small fairy flying around with her fluttering wings. He looked at Wu-He. Wu-He kept following Muyang around everywhere after they came out of the trial of She somehow noticed Muyang's change in emotions and like she said, he was continuously troubled by one thing. Awakening. Besides his territory getting stronger, there was a need for Muyang to develop himself on his own. The first thing was awakening. He about to reach 100 in his main pure stats. Strength and agility are over 100. All that was left was stamina. However, his stamina stat didn't seem like it was increasing like before. In the past, Muyang had a chronic problem with low stamina. Since intelligence and wisdom were stats that influenced the mind and unless he planned on becoming a magician, they could be left low but there was no way to advance with his low stamina. It was clear that there was a limit in raising it simply by moving. Of course, unlike the past, there was a way. King Slaughterer and soul exploitation is my last resort. He believed he could raise the rest of his stamina using these two methods. However, it would take time or he would need to take apart the undead he made already. It was best to try his best and use the two methods as last resort. Then, husband. Wu-He spoke as she twisted her body as if she was embarrassed. For a moment, Muyang looked at the land beyond his territory. Since you're a fairy, you should know a lot about the trials. He openly ignored her but Wu-He didn't care. Instead, she placed her hands on the side of her waist and confidently spoke. Of course, I do. In that field, there is no fairy who can catch up to Wu-He. Is it possible to find out what kind of trials are nearby? Wu-He placed her hand on her head and pondered for a moment. I think it is possible. Since Wu-He is very popular among fairies. Obviously. Wu-He. He didn't think she would be useful but if what she was saying was true, she would be quite useful. If he could learn of the locations of trials, it would be possible for him to monopolize them. Lead me. What? Now. As Muyang nodded, Wu-He's cheeks turned red. Gulp. I can't do it for free, with one kiss. Muyang's eyes were completely cold and emotionless. He was already a cold man but now he felt much colder. After realizing this, Wu-He broke out into a cold sweat. It's a joke. Wu-He. I will quickly look for them and come back. And she fluttered her wings and left the territory. For a moment, Muyang watched her go and then clenched his fists. Since I've already completed the first metamorphosis, I can't be certain if I can repeat it when the time comes but I will look for the dwarves afterwards. He had a lot of materials like the heart of the phoenix, dragon bones, etc., but there weren't a lot of blacksmiths who could make use of these materials properly. Though it was possible that the fire tars could but the dwarves were probably multiple times better than them. And Muyang knew a way to find the dwarves. Even if he didn't, he could just use a little wish. Since they weren't the type to run away, he needed to meet the criteria first for the awakening. Wu-He flew up the sky and looked down towards the ground. And then, she continuously dropped her wing dust and waited for a response. Wing dust was like a signal among fairies. Not too long after, a fairy who read the signal flew towards her. Pant. Wu-He. Oh, my love. The fairy was quite fat. He was sweating as he approached her. Wu-He knitted her brows. What? You're Pant. Why are you here? Pant. I'm repairing a trial. Wu-He, are you now willing to accept my love? In your dreams. I'm taken. What did you say? The fairy called Pant fell to his knees when he heard this shocking news. A stream of tears fell down from his eye. Wu-He didn't care and just spoke proudly. Besides that, I can take a look at it, right? Where is it? What are you talking about? The trial. Who knows? Maybe my heart will be moved if you make a good trial and receive a wonderful house. He hates fairies who are incapable. To take he, a huge house big as a castle is a must. She raised her head high. Then, the fairy who was kneeling got up and tightly bit his lips. Pant pant. Then, follow me. I will prove my abilities to you. Fortunately, if she looked at trials, he had a possibility. He was planning to make the most balanced trial out of all the fairies and receive the dream house of all the fairies as a reward. Normally, it was custom for the one who courted to prepare for the house, and Pant Pant was confident. Soon, he was guided into the box of the trial. It was well made considering it's made by someone like you. But, like a sister-in-law, she looked around the trial and made a face. Why, what's wrong? This is too hard. Why are monsters like Cerberus in here? Pant Pant, the three-headed Cerberus is a guardian that guards the room. It's the part I am the most of. There's no way you would have placed a monster like that all of a sudden. There is a way to clear it. Of course. Since there are 3 heads, 3 methods are required. I've modified it so that the challenger has to consider the balance of them all to beat it. He smiled brightly. The fairy who watching her held his chest. His heart was felt like it was about to burst. There were no words that better explained his emotions better than this. He was like a princess to fairies. A fairy of matchless beauty and confident personality that would even make the gods fall in love with her. It was merely from the standard of the fairies, but that was why numerous fairies tried to win her heart, and he always gave them a flat refusal. But, now that chance was given to him. How could he not be excited? Then later, he secretly asked. He. Is that so? What is the method you speak of? Chapter 73. Sahan. He who was both the ruler of the Ice Dakibus and a Duoxini approached Myung. Myung turned his head and said to the excited Sahan. What is it? Please show the difference between the humans and Dakibus. Behind him was another Duoxinis. The two kneeled and requested. Tell me what the problem is. The Dakibus aren't able to comprehend why these few tens of humans are living in the center of the settlement. Aren't more than tens of thousands living on the edges. It was as if he was saying that the positions of the owner and the guest were reversed. However, Myung shook his head. The ones who made the dungeon and all the building in the center were humans. To chase away these people who had united together after experiencing Heidegger's tyranny together? It wasn't rational. Though this could be beneficial today, if he gave in once, there was nothing saying that he could stop it next time. Myung had no thought of discarding either the humans or the Dakibus. If I create harmony, my Lord point will go up. Above all, Myung remembered that his Lord points would go up. It said that the humans and the Dakibus were living in harmony and granted him 10 Lord points that were difficult to achieve. It meant that if he developed it further or embraced more species, he would be able to earn even more. There was no precedent where all intelligent species lived in one territory. And Myung thought it wouldn't be bad to have these humans and Dakibus as a start towards that kind of territory. Could it be due to being in the forest of death for 40 years? He didn't have almost any of the natural bias other humans had. They were living here first. And in my territory, I will not let any sort of depredation on any species. And so, Myung decided to call those actions depredation. It was the first rule he founded as the Lord. Then are you telling us to just endure? Sahan too did not want to take it by force. He wanted a compromise. That Myung would act rationally. It seemed like the dissatisfaction among Dakibus was at its limit. It wouldn't be wise to leave like this. Myung said. I will allow duels. However, I will not allow forced duels. When you guys come to an agreement, each side will bet what they want, and with my permission, you can duel. The victor will gain while the loser will lose. This was the underworld. It was honestly impossible to truly come to an agreement using only words. A world where the strong survive. There was a need for physical action to settle disputes. But, he planned to add a rule to make them recognize that they were members of the territory. As he didn't have any experience leading people, his actions may seem crude, but this was why he needed experience. Myung decided that he would first face the problems head-on. We follow the wisdom of Sehun deeply bowed his head as if he liked this method. Including him, a few Dakibas had the warrior blood flowing through them. There was no way they didn't know the sacredness of a duel. It will start after a month, once the territory has become secure. Myung sternly emphasized this point. With this 1 month, he would be able to pacify the Dakibas' dissatisfaction briefly and give the humans time to get stronger. There definitely was a gap between the Dakibas and humans. This time would be used to close that gap. Bolton is probably good. Bolton was the only undead that could grow. He would also become stronger during defensive battles. There were various ways you could interpret defensive battles. This duel was also something he needed to defend. And it was possible for him to grow stronger to do so. With a bit of Myung's help, it could actually become an equal fight. Myung sent Bolton into Murtyudun's dungeon. When he explained the situation, he replied, "If it's for the citizens, I will," and entered the dungeon without hesitation. It seemed that Bolton understood that if they lost this battle, humans would have no place to stand. As humans were a minority and Dakibas were the majority. And another day had passed before Woohee returned. "Woohee! Woohee has brought you incredible news." She flapped her wings as she whirled around Myung. It looked like she was extremely happy. "Is it information about a trial?" "Yup. A fatty who followed me around was building a nest." She was more useful than he thought. For her to be able to find a method to beat a trial on top of finding its location. And then, Woohee stuck her lips out. "But, the important thing is, there is a rule where I can only tell you one thing. Solomon said that if we break this promise, he wouldn't give us a house. So I can only tell you one thing." "One thing? Hey. What are you curious about?" Woohee saw everything. The structure of the trial, type, the list of rewards and even the method to beat the monster guarding the door. It seemed like the 4 things Woohee said were the key issues with this trial. And that she judged that picking one of these 4 would give him the most advantage. On the other hand, looking at how she didn't mention the location of the trial, it seemed like her guiding him wasn't a problem. "Trials make me stronger." Myung made a decision. There was a limit to only hunting. However, every time Myung passed a trial, he would get stronger. Trials were the reason why he was able to advance at such a steep rate. The key to the awakening, he believed that was in trials as well. "I'll hear the last one." "You made a good choice." Woohee briefly explained. "The method of exterminating the monster that guarded the door." Myung nodded his head after listening to her explanation. "Guide me to the location of the trial." "Yes, just trust and follow Woohee." When Woohee stuck out her lips, Myung raised his finger and blocked her. It was a cave that led underground. As he slowly descended, he saw the box of the trial at the bottom. Looking at the 3m tall door, Myung nodded his head. "This is it. From here, Woohee isn't able to go in. Woohee has to remain a spectator of the trial. If I personally give support, then the lightning will fall on my head." Woohee drooped her head with regret. However, Myung didn't care. He had already received important information about the trial, including its location. It would be pressing his luck if he asked for any more. Woohee's existence was similar to that of a master key. However, the master key was only able to open the door. To go in and achieve his goals was solely up to Myung. "Be careful. However, this trial will be of significant help to dear husband." "Okay." Myung slowly moved towards the box of the trial. His surrounding immediately turned dark and word formed with light appeared. With this friendly welcome, his surroundings changed. It was still dark, but it was bright enough for him to look around. What the? New recruit. It's a goblin this time. TAS, Tai. GRRK, growling. All sorts of different monsters were crammed inside a small room. Goblins, orcs, trolls, a devil with a brand, and even humans. Myung lowered his gaze. Chains. At some point, his feet were chained. Unlike its appearance, it was quite heavy that it was hard to even move. However, something was strange. All these monsters were gathered together, but there was no commotion. It would have been normal if they tried to kill or eat each other. It didn't like it was simply due to the chains. Stop licking your lips, you trash. Since we're going to be able to go crazy soon anyways. The devil with A3 branded on its forehead mocked. Its tattered wings and black nails proved that it was a devil. At the same time, Myung realized that this weird piece was due to this devil. It's a slave devil. The third seat, Vasagos. Devils lived deep in demon gods' territories. They only started to act after the Great Calamity. So, in 10 years. He never thought he would see a devil so soon, but if it was a slave devil, it didn't really matter. A devil that fell after committing a great sin. No one would care if it died or not. The 3 brand was the symbol of the demon god Vasago. It seemed like it was originally a devil that served Vasago. Of course, there were more than 10 million devils that served Vasago. It meant that is just one of many. He rid his mind of useless thoughts and with scraping sounds, moved his feet. Why is a person here? He approached a man and asked. And the man filled with fear trembled his body. That is, I found the box of the trial while exploring. His face was that of a person who didn't know why he was here. However, Myung was able to understand after listening to his words that there wasn't only one entrance to this trial. Anyways, I'm not tasty. I am so thin that there isn't anything to eat. There is no excitement in eating you. That's right. The man sighed as if he was relieved. After some time had passed, as if his lips were itchy, the man started to mumble to himself. I thought I would die in this crowd of monsters. Everyone wanted to eat me. If it wasn't for that devil, I would have already died. Sigh. Did he relax? This situation really made one frightened, but for him to drop his guard in an instant and approach him in a friendly manner was unexpected. Myung asked a few things he was curious about. Did you come here alone? No. Including me, 7 people entered. Like you see, we seem to have been split. There could even be more humans besides them. However, Myung had never heard of the underground arena. It meant it wasn't a well-known place, and if it wasn't for Wohee, he would have passed it without knowing. Clank! The steel bars that blocked the room slowly started to open. At the same time, the slave devil said. Trash, fight hard. It's still useless, but it's much better to die fighting here than being eaten by the Cerberus. Swish! Clank! The door opened. Creak! Thud! The first thing he saw was an ogre. He stood in the center swinging a huge club, as if provoking them. However, the ogre didn't last long. As countless monsters poured in, it became chaotic. Active, small gust, active. A bit faster. Whoosh! Rough winds blew beside Myung. The gust flung an approaching orc into the air. When Myung turned his head, the man was holding a cane as he smiled shamefully. Let's cooperate. Even though we aren't the same species, I believe we are of the same mind. Are you a soul language sorcerer? One who creates and activates commands. A soul language sorcerer. Well, something like that. Besides that, what is your name? Mine's Bug. Myung. Your name is quite unusual. Though my name's the same. Bug roared with laughter. He looked to be in his mid-30s. Bug. Myung tilted his head. He seemed to have heard of a similar name. But, there was no one famous who had that name. Anyways, it looks like we can just stay put. It seems like it'll end with those bastards fighting each other. The fight among monsters was intense. Like he said, it looked like they would survive just by standing still. There was no need to display their existence. Bug let out a sigh. I don't see my comrades. Aw damn, just where are they? Swish. Myung unsheathed anguish. It was good to spectate, but he wouldn't earn much just by spectating. To understand and comprehend the trial, it was best to just fight first. When Myung entered into the chaos, Bug grabbed his forehead. Oh my, what to do? If he ends up facing the devil, he's doomed. The slave devil was still a devil. It was stronger than most monsters. On top of that, that slave devil didn't seem like a normal devil. Myung didn't care as he wielded anguish. Though the Dakibi was quite unusual, it was still a Dakibi. In Bug's perspective, it looked rash. Bug touched his cane before widening his eyes. What the? Is that really a Dakibi? They were unfounded worries. There was no need for him to worry. Splash! Blood splattered as the blade danced. Unlike what Bug expected, Myung was like a fish in water as he whisked around the battlefield. One comes from the Japanese word kotodama, which is a belief that mystical powers dwell in words. Chapter 74. Underground Arena. In the first battle, 800 monsters fought against each other with only half surviving. This meant that fights would constantly break out, and Myung knew the method for winning. Show 70% and hide the 30%. The main point of this was to make 70% look like it was his full strength. It was important to make his opponents not complete disregard him and also think that if they fought, he would win. It was Myung's secret from becoming the final survivor of the assassin lessons. If it is that strong, it would have held quite a high position in the devil's army. Myung looked at the surrounding monsters. Only a few monsters were truly strong. Especially, the slave devil, its fighting power was greater than he had imagined. The black nails ripped monsters apart. Even the thick skins of ogres were of no use. They ripped apart like tofu the moment they touched. The third seat, Vasago. Although there were countless devils that served him, but with that much power, it had to be at least a mid-rank devil. Not all devils were strong. That was why the stronger the devil, the more likely it was for them to be exempted from the sins they had committed. There was no way for Myung to find out what it did wrong to be thrown into an underground arena like this. It seems best to not run into it for now. In an arena, there was always a chance that they would fight. For that possibility, Myung didn't show off his true skills. Only, he was successful in giving off the impression that he was someone they shouldn't annoy to the point others couldn't disregard him. Monsters only reasoned with their strength. You would be attacked if you looked weak. Save me, grrrk! An orc cried out loud. Smash! However, Myung swung anguish and smashed its head. With a cynical smile and a sword that even absorbed the blood vomiting out of its mouth, Myung could only be called a monster. It was a perfect act to show others. The weak monsters avoided him on their own. The strong ones couldn't easily approach him. Active, screen, active. A bit stronger. Eaok, shit. On the other hand, Bug, who was spectating from afar, had no choice but to move his cane frantically. Avoiding the strong, including Myung, the weak monsters all went to Bug. Reasoning with strength. It was the difference between those who figured it out and those who didn't. Instead, standing still invited the attacks of other monsters. Ha, ha. Damn it. Do I really look that weak to you, you fuckers? Bug yelled out loud after finishing off about 20 monsters by himself. At that moment, the fight ended. Clank. The huge steel door in the middle of the arena opened and, from there, huge armors appeared. Living armor. Myung instantly realized what those armors were. Spectres in empty armor. They were high-rank magical equipment that possessed souls. Stop fighting and follow us. About 20 armors stopped the fight. They quickly controlled the adrenaline-filled monsters. The red-eyed slave devil that was devouring a monster's flesh meekly stopped as the living armors appeared. It seems like it has lots of experience with arenas. There was nothing bad in following the experienced. Myung shook anguish before sheathing it on his waist. Afterwards, as they moved towards the location the living armors appeared, extremely loud shouts could be heard. Wheat! Huet! The ones that entered this time don't seem to have much guts. Fight! Kill! Behind the arena, there seemed to be another arena. However, the size was incomparable. An overwhelming size. At least a few tens of thousands of monsters of different varieties filled up the seats. They weren't just simply monsters, but there were also other species. Dwarves, elves, werewolves, and even vampires. It's the gathering of all the species. He chuckled. And at the same time realized. These are the ones unable to escape the trial. It was impossible for so many different species to be gathered in one place. However, it was possible if they were forced to stay in this underground arena. That meant, if I don't satisfy the condition, I can't leave. And that condition seemed to be quite a particular one. As if it wasn't, there was no way this many would still remain here. When the slave devil showed up last, the crowd became even rowdier. Tenacious Olonus. Not the civilian slaughterer Olonus? How many times is this? Get lost. I'm sick of looking at your face. Numerous of species jeered at it. As Myung expected, the slave devil, Olonus seemed to be experienced and participated in these types of arenas quite a few times. However, Olonus completely ignored their jeers. It quietly moved and left the arena. Afterwards, red arrows appeared in front of his eyes. Myung nodded his head and started to move. The room was shabby. It was so small that you could touch the walls if you stretched out your legs, and smell of piss emanated from everywhere. Gawk, I'd rather sleep outside. Quack. As if the rooms were assigned according to their body sizes, his surroundings were filled with screams. However, Myung lied down quite comfortably. It's comfortable. It was good that he could at least spread his legs. While attempting to assassinate a target, he sometimes had to spend time in a much more cramped place for months. The fact that he could spread his legs were good enough that Myung thought it was very comfortable. On the other hand, monsters were creatures that roamed the vast plains. Of course, they wouldn't be satisfied with a cramped room. It said that it would notify us automatically when an opponent is decided. That meant that before that time, it was free time. Myung momentarily caught his breath and then stood up from his spot. On the end of the narrow path, he found 4 signs. Each were written "Slave." For there to be slaves above everything else. Myung walked towards the direction the sign directed him towards. Not long after, he arrived in a large room and he was able to witness numerous monsters locked up in cages with their hands and feet tied up. There were gnolls, orcs, wyverns which were known as the kings of the sky, and even mermaid lamias. Though they weren't top-rank monsters, it was amazing nonetheless. As he entered the room, words appeared as if they were a warning. Quite a few monsters were looking at slaves or purchasing them, and the method of purchasing them was simple. If you pay the appropriate ons written on their cages, you can buy them as your slave. I chose this one. No. I was first. A troll and an orc warkiff were fighting against each other. It wasn't odd to see a dispute occur with different types of species. Since there wasn't a restriction on the purchaser, there were times when they talked with their bodies than through words. It's forbidden to fight outside of battles. And whenever this happened, out of nowhere, living armors appeared and attacked the two until they were beaten into pulps. Myung rubbed his chin as he watched the unconscious troll and orc warkiff being dragged to their rooms. All the economy is run by ons in this arena. Instead of feeling like a trial, it felt like someone had compressed a whole world. Myung looked around the whole place and before stopping. Dwarf. An old dwarf was locked up in a cage. The number 50,000 was written in front of the cage. Compared to other slaves, he was quite expensive. However, dwarves were very rare in nature. They did possess exquisite craftsmanship, so it was understandable. Myung slowly approached the cage the dwarf was in. The old dwarf didn't even look at him. Don't just loiter around and get lost. Do you know the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance? Since it didn't seem like he could have a long conversation with it, he instantly went to the point. Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance. It was the name of an alliance made by few dwarf groups. They were hiding in the other side of the world, and if the dwarf in front of him was from that alliance, he was willing to help free it. It will make it easier for me to make equipment. Even if he found the Three Pickaxe Sack Alliance, whether they were willing to make Myung equipment was a different matter. He needed to move their hearts in order to use the heart of the phoenix and the dragon bones. However, dwarves were the type of creatures who always repaid debts. It seemed possible for them to accept a favor from Myung if he freed a dwarf from their alliance. That place, I don't know of it. Get lost. His body flinched. His response was also late. He knows. Myung went closer to the cage and quieted down. If you're part of that alliance, I will get you out. Not right away. But, Myung said it as if it was decided. The veins of the old dwarf immediately bulged. Nonsense. As a dokibi, what can you do? And even if you had that much ons, I would rather die by biting my own tongue than become a slave. Then, what's your reason for not killing yourself right now? What? It was already decided that you were to become someone's slave. There is no point in living, is there? There was no point in living, but he was still alive? This was also a lie. The old dwarf clenched his teeth as Myung spat out words sharp as daggers. That bastard! I will not die until I see Olonus die. Are you talking about that slave devil? That's right. That bastard had already collected enough ons to escape this place, but he's continuously repeating the arena. My son, also died by that bastard's hands. Thump. Thump. The old dwarf smacked his head on the cage a few times. Blood dripped from his forehead and Myung could feel the madness in his eyes. You want to buy me and use me? Then, kill that bastard. If you make that happen, I will even lick your asshole. It will be impossible though. The old dwarf mocked. Kikikikikik. K ha 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 ha. And he laughed strangely before breaking out into tears. He wasn't himself. It was certain, he was crazy. He was certain as the specters in Azura Path were reacting to him. Olonus, hey! He was planning to not bump into that slave devil if he could. It was because, though he couldn't understand why a devil was in this type of arena, but from just watching it fight once, Myung was able to tell it was quite strong. It would be difficult right now. Wait for me. However, it wasn't impossible. He boasted how this place would be very helpful to Myung. If Wohi, who was familiar with Myung's fighting abilities, said this, then it probably meant there were quite a few methods to increase his strength. If he found them and awakened, he felt it was enough to have a decent fight with Olonus. Myung turned his body. Proper fights started the next day. Asterisk. Myung warmed up before stepping onto the arena. A werewolf appeared on the other side soon after. By simply looking at the odds, most placed their bets on the werewolf. There were some who trusted in the beginner's luck and bet on Myung, but they were a small minority. Many matches are progressing at the same time. And there were many matches that were occurring besides Myung and the werewolf. Since there were so many, it seemed like they were happening at that same time. Anyways, Myung placed his remaining 500 ons on himself. He didn't think he would lose. He was just concerned about how he was going to win. Win after an intense fight. He needed to maintain this kind of betting level so that he could fight more advantageously. If he was to win overwhelmingly, the odds would obviously lower. If he wanted to make a clear profit with high odds, he obviously needed to show himself winning by a narrow margin. As the odds were dependent on who placed their ons on who. Just withdraw. I don't want to kill a beginner. The werewolf flat out disregarded Muyang. Instead, Muyang took out anguish. The werewolf clicked his tongue when it saw this. A Dakibi can't beat me. Muyang smiled slightly at this remark. Normally, a Dakibi was unable to win against a werewolf. Normally. However, would the werewolf know? That Muyang was the ruler of all the Dakibis. That he was an exception that lied outside the box. Chapter 75, Awakening, End. TL, Yoni. Edited, Mayanai. Last warning. Withdraw. You talk too much. Muyang moved first. Anguish vibrated slightly as it cut through the air. Werewolves were monsters with strong wolf-like tendencies. All of a sudden, it jumped up in the air and roughed up its fur. After landing on the ground, it bent its upper body, half-opened its eyes and prepared for battle. You lost your last chance. Last chance? Muyang shrugged his shoulders. Muyang was already familiar with werewolves' agility. At the same time, he realized that the levels of this arena were considerably high. As I go further down the floor, stronger opponents will show up. Currently, this was the 5th floor. You gained the authority to go down a floor if you won 10 times. Of course, stronger monsters were bound to show up the lower he went. Therefore, slowly, I'll gain everything that I can. The thing he desired right now was, of course, ons. To adjust the betting ratio and to make personal gains. The monsters would only notice something was wrong, once Muyang's pouch became fatter later. There was no one who could control their strength more artistically than Muyang. Even Wang Chunglin, the leader of Forest of Death, marveled at Muyang's ability to finely control his muscles that even allowed him to control the slightest tremors. How could monsters notice such exquisite skills? No matter how good their dynamic visual acuity was, if he was determined, they could only be confused. Make your frantic last-ditch effort. Because I will hunt you today. The werewolf spoke with certainty. The bloated-up body seemed like it could even break a rock, and its sharp teeth and claws seemed like it could cut through everything. Not just the werewolf. Everyone who was watching their fight thought this way. That the result of this fight was decided from the beginning. That a Dakibi couldn't win against a werewolf. However, Muyang silently raised anguish. He didn't care about anyone else's gaze or thoughts. Whatever the situation was, he was more concerned with how he would proceed. What was more? A hunt, you say? Muyang laughed. It could believe in whatever it wanted. On top of that, it even said what Muyang wanted to say, so it was quite commendable. Slash. The wolf's head separated from the body and flew through the air. It happened in a blink of an eye. However, the werewolf's eyes were filled with suspicion. Grr. You fucking bastard. Damn. It was so close. The monsters that watched Muyang and the werewolf fight were swearing. A close match. It was a fight that people truly thought was won by a paper-thin margin. No, if you just simply looked at the fight, the werewolf was constantly superior. In reality, Muyang's body was also totally wrecked. However, it lacked that one single blow, and in the end, Muyang was able to turn the tables around. Like an episode of a drama, an intense fight had occurred. Ha! A Dakibi won a werewolf. It's probably beginner's luck. If the sword bounced off in a different direction, Calm would have won. While Muyang was getting attacked by the werewolf, anguish bounced out, and coincidentally it ripped the werewolf's eye. There was no room for doubts. Beginner's luck. If Muyang hadn't ripped the werewolf's eye, it was a fight the Dakibi couldn't win. Even in the long run, his stamina would have lagged behind and he would have been doomed. Of course, no one would believe everything was calculated by Muyeong. No one. I can see all the paths of a sword. Muyeong scratched his cheek. When he gained a sword master skill, his understanding of swords greatly increased. Now, he could see most of the paths a sword would take. As he placed back anguish to his waist, a huge electronic board in the air rang with a beep sound. Afterwards, the results appeared in front of Muyeong. The 500 ons arena fee which Muyeong and the werewolf provided were added up and returned to Muyeong. From just one fight, he gained almost 3,000 ons. If he just continued this for a few more times, a few 10,000 ons didn't seem hard to save. Olonis. Before leaving the arena, Muyeong looked at Olonis, who was standing by himself on top of the battleground. Slave devil. The one who was called civilian slaughterer, his opponent ended up not appearing. Betting ratio was 1.01. More amazingly, you could say that the ratio was truly overwhelming. Everyone was certain Olonis was going to win. With the opponent forfeiting, all the bets were nullified, but it clear evidence that Olonis was that much of a target to avoid. He's the strongest monster among the monsters gathered here. Muyeong was now certain. The level of fighters was high overall, but the one on top was Olonis. Why would a devil who would have been above a mid-rank under demon god Vasago's command be in a place like this? It's something I need to overcome. Muyeong was determined. An encounter with a devil wasn't planned, but it seemed like a good thing. It was a golden opportunity to test his limits and to see how well his strengths will work against a devil. If the path I'm walking is right, he would win, if not he would lose. Muyeong's eyes deeply sunk. 22,000 ons. Muyeong didn't place bets on other fights. He just placed all his ons on his own fights. Consequently, he was able to get hold of 22,000 ons with only 3 wins. However, continuous wins would only leave room for doubts. No matter how realistically he fought, doubt was something like that. If he was to lose once or to forfeit at a time like this, he might be able to erase that doubt. However, there was something that was bothering him before that. These types of trials always have the opportunity to place a record in Solomon's Hall of Fame. Solomon's Hall of Fame. If he was to increase the rankings, he would obviously get an appropriate reward. He was at crossroads, whether he was going to place his name on Solomon's Hall of Fame and to receive a reward or get ons to profit from it. Some things I can purchase with ons are slaves and general merchandise. He did go to the other shops, but there wasn't really much in the weapon or armor shops. From the beginning, in an arena where monsters fought, it was highly unlikely for them to sell equipment for humans to use. Instead, there were a few things in the general merchandise store that caught his attention. If I continue to win, I could buy all the things I wanted. Since general merchandise were things he could buy whenever he wanted with ons. However, the rewards from the Hall of Fame were most likely to be rare equipment. Ones that were hard to get and very difficult to find. It seemed like a waste to lose this opportunity. That was why, Muyeong decided to walk the path of leaving his name in the Solomon's Hall of Fame. The problem was that it was highly likely for humans much stronger than Muyeong to have participated in this arena. There was a possibility for a stronger monster than Olonis to exist in the lower floors. To leave a record in Solomon's Hall of Fame, he needed to become stronger than he was now. The arena fights are 1 versus 1. I can't use the undead here. Muyeong made his decision. I will use the soul exploitation skill. He was going to use it as his last resort, but since he already made his decision to use it, it was best to act fast. To be fully prepared for every situation, he needed time to get used to his strengthened body. Muyeong turned his status viewer and read the soul exploitation skill description once more. Skill name, Soul Exploitation, F. Description: absorb undead with an art score above 70 to increase your stats. There is a very low possibility of obtaining one of the skills the undead possessed. The efficiency varies depending on the art score, skill rank and the material of the undead. He was limited to only undead with art scores above 70. Prince and the Avengers, Blazing Spear Soldier, Sorceress of Lightning, Black Sun Warrior, Baltan, and Heidegger. Among them, there were 2 undead that were slowly becoming less useful as Muyang got stronger. Blazing Spear Soldier and Sorceress of Lightning. The 2 were undead he created in the free-for-all trial as he entered the underworld. They were quite skillful for young rising stars of the 5 great clans. However, after becoming undead, their path to growth was blocked. At the time, they were very useful, but it was obvious that their usefulness was slowly decreasing. Muyang summoned the 2 in his cramped room. "I need you guys to become my strength." It was like a death sentence. They were already dead, but it was crueler to even exploit their souls. But Muyang spoke those words as if nothing was wrong. "I will gladly give myself." The Blazing Spear Soldier bowed his body. It was the same for the Sorceress of Lightning. The 2 were subordinated undead. They had no right to refuse in the first place. As undead, they were to die or live depending on Muyang's orders. Muyang slowly moved and placed his hand on top of the Blazing Spear Soldier and the Sorceress of Lightning. It seemed like a waste, but he had to do it. The strength of the 2 would become nutrients and live inside Muyang's body. Soul exploitation. Soon, a bright soul appeared above both of the undead's head, and as he grabbed them a change started to occur. Blaze. Muyang's whole body burst into flames. The flames stimulated the specters in Azura path. The specters made the flames wrap Muyang even thicker and produced a strange scene. As if they knew what would happen next, they produced a strong wall so that no one could interrupt him. Afterwards, a round ring started to appear on top of Muyang's head. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The rings with the energy of the 5 elements, wood, fire, metal, water, and earth, slowly circulated around him. And as the 5 rings that circulated him started to enter Muyang's nostrils one by one, he trembled as if he was hit by lightning. At the same time, Muyang's body slowly floated. Essences of the materialistic realm, energy is the root to life, and God exists in the world of the mind. His mind was blank. Like a monk spreading the teachings of Buddha, Muyang quietly repeated the words over and over again. You could say he became one with selflessness. He was not disturbed by anyone and no one could disturb him. In a white world, Muyang only repeated those words. On the other hand, the wall of fire and the specters was becoming stronger. Everything was cut off and Muyang became the path that accepted everything. If he was touched by water, he would become water, and if he was touched by fire, he would become fire. He was able to grasp a perfect purity that all souls and elements could pass through. However, the time that purity could be sustained was extremely short. It was short, but it felt everlasting. And at that crossroad of purity, Muyang heard someone's voice. What do you want to be? Make your decision. 1-3 Essence Congregation of the Crown. Primary 5 Chi. But honestly not sure what they really mean. 2 The 3 Treasures Jung Gishan, Essence, Energy, Spirit/God, the 3 parts to Chinese medicine. In the novel it is explained through Muyang's thoughts. Essence, Jung, is something in the materialistic level, energy, Gi, is the root to life, and God, Shin, exists in the world of the mind. Chapter 76, Star of the Absolute, 1. TL, Yoni. Edited, Mayanai. It was a voice that transcended all awareness. He felt a great influence he hadn't felt even when he faced Azura. The owner of the voice spoke. Where does your true purity lie? Muyang momentarily recalled what Augur had said in the past. Who am I? Not a Dakibi or a human, not in the past or the future, an existence in the middle. That was Muyang. He went into metamorphosis. This was a phenomenon and a present he obtained after breaking through his limits again. The longer he spent in this state, the more likely he would be able to find his true purity. Muyang looked into his past. And slowly retraced his steps. What do I want to become? It was the single question that crossed his mind during his exploration of his past and future in search for his true purity. Did he want to become a hero? Or did he want to become a demon king? His goal was to complete his revenge and to drive out the demon gods. However, after that, after accomplishing all his goals, Muyeong didn't know what he truly wanted to be. He thought it wouldn't be too late to think about it after he completed his current goals. However, that wasn't right. It shouldn't be this way. The order was switched. Since then, everything had become slightly crooked. If he was unable to tread the path of purity, he would have gone further and further away from it. Who do I look up to? There was an existence whom he couldn't reach even when he stretched his hand out towards it. He had turned his back away from it thinking that he, who had killed countless of others, shouldn't be given this opportunity. He comforted himself by saying that he had no choice but to walk a path different from others. I want to become a hero. It was actually different. Muyeong wanted to become a hero. Not an assassin, not a demon king, but truthfully, he wanted to become a hero. Like the dragon lord he killed. Like the other heroes who carried out their will until the bitter end when they died by his sword. However, I can't become one. It was impossible. He who killed others without hesitation and who didn't care about the sacrifices of others, how could he become a hero? He once did think about becoming a demon king-like hero, but that was partially a joke. And that thought didn't change even now when he stood on the path of purity. Just, if there was something he wanted to become absolute. He was going to be like an enormous tree that did sway from any wind. What if he was a dokibi or a human? What if he was a hero or a demon king? It was the same for the past and the future. If he stood at the pinnacle, if he reached the utmost limits, there was no point to differentiating. The absolute purity, it was the very thing that could overcome anything. An existence that was acknowledged as only one form. It was a position that no one could sway and one where everyone could only gaze at it, a genuine sky that existed above the sky. That was Muyeong's purity. It felt like a lot of time had passed. A few days, few months, perhaps even a few years. Muyeong floated in a place where he was unable to notice the passage of time. He opened his eyes when the wall of specters and flames subsided. Something has changed. First, he noticed that his body had changed. Externally and internally. His skin was soft like a newborn baby and his senses had become enhanced. He was able to hear all the movements and sounds around him. That wasn't all. After checking his changes by turning his status viewer, he laughed in disbelief. A lot of things had changed as a result of his awakening. Especially, the thing he earned at the end, he was dumbfounded in amazement. Achievement effect. Star of Purity, S, all stats plus 20, waking phase of the Absolute. S rank. Perhaps it was because the Absolute had to be strong without leaning towards one place. What was more, it increased all his stats by 20. The A rank Gremari's Anguish stopped at increasing his stats by 3, but that only showed the great difference between A rank and S rank. It wasn't like Muyeong was attempting to create or find an S rank equipment for no reason. Waking phase. It probably means that there is a possibility for it to go higher in rank. The fact that this might not even be the end was enough to give him goosebumps. Even intelligence and wisdom's pure stats rose by 10 each. With just one awakening, it completely overturned his fighting strength. While he looked through the rest of the changes, Muyeong couldn't help but exclaim in awe. Stats. Strength 162, 109 plus 53, Agility 156, 103 plus 53. Stamina 144, 102 plus 42, Intelligence 116, 74 plus 42. Wisdom 112, 70 plus 42, Fighting Aura 104, 66 plus 38. Magic Resistance 92, 54 plus 38, Spirit Ability 86, 38 plus 48. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Completed the first metamorphosis. You have accomplished 3 flowers condensing onto the head and 5 chi and have realized purity. All 5 main stats passed 100. Since intelligence and wisdom were tied to the effectiveness of skill, it was very difficult to raise, but even they passed the first wall. And Myung placed his hand out. Flames formed above it. It was the skill cry of fire the blazing spear soldier had. Is this the first attack skill I've obtained? It was forcefully taken by using soul exploitation. When he thought about it, it was the first time he had even obtained a proper attack skill. Since up until now, all Myung had learned were skills regarding undead. Blaze. The flames burned rapidly. The flames reflected in Myung's eyes. At the same time, he was naturally able to understand its structure and how to use it more effectively. E. D. C. What the? Myung's body flinched. When he concentrated for a moment, the rank of the skill increased. It jumped up by a whopping 3 ranks. From understanding after a single use. You can increase a skill rank faster with high wisdom, but even considering that, it's too fast. It was impossible. It was a speed that wouldn't make sense unless his wisdom stat had surpassed 500. This meant that there was another cause. Did the star of purity produce this effect? Myung shook his head. 3 flowers condensing onto the head and 5 chi. It was probably due to them. The pathways in his body had opened and his ability to understand all things was forcefully increased under the sole influence of these 2. It must be possible for the other skills. Myung experimented by using lower rank skills. However, after experimenting, only one other skill rose. Eye of the Sky. The rest of the skills didn't even budge. The Lord skill was influenced by the land and the citizens, so it was understandable, but it was unexpected to see only the Eye of the Sky skill rise in rank. It looks like I can't increase the skills from Lord classes. It was because the rest of the skills were from the Lord classes. However, at least it was something. His intelligence and wisdom had already greatly increased. If it wasn't for the Lord class skills, the rest of his skills could instantly be raised to C rank. Asking for more than this was excessive greed. Just then, Myung was called to fight. After recalling the specters and the flames, he left the room. Thump! The upper body of an ogre fell to the floor. Its severed arms and head were thoroughly burned. And Myung stood on top of it. He gets stronger the more he fights. He probably hid his skills from the start. 9 wins, complete victory, with no forfeits. Ogre Paratcha was one of the losers of the 5th arena. Murmur, murmur. Unlike in the past, this wasn't a fight people didn't watch. Numerous spectators paid attention to Myung and Ogre's fight. The result was, again, an unbelievable victory. As he continued to thrive, the betting ratio had decreased significantly, but there was a great deal of people who thought that he probably wouldn't win against the Ogre Paratcha. The difference between Dakibus and ogres were too great that you could even say that ogres were their natural predators. But even then, Myung's betting ratio was still low because the fights Myung participated in were all full of tension. It wasn't odd to see something unexpected happen in Myung's method of fighting. He won all the fights people declared he couldn't. Myung rapidly rose to become a new star in this underground arena. It was a bit dangerous. He sheathed anguish. Afterwards, he wiped the sweat from his forehead. However, the tip of his lips had slightly curved upwards. Although it was dangerous, he won against an ogre without any help of his undead or specters. It was also different from the time he fought against an ogre in the Hum's trial not too long ago. Back then, all he could do was hold back an ogre. Even with the help of the specters. However, he was now strong enough to fight an ogre with his natural strength. 14,000 ons. He even received an additional income. With 14,000 ons, he could buy the old dwarf and get most of the supplies from the general merchandise store. If he strategically used losses and forfeits, he could have gathered even more ons, but to get his name on the Solomon's Hall of Fame, he needed to restrict himself to some extent. Myung turned his head and looked at the electronic board. The huge electronic board in the air showed a ranking dependent on the winning ratio. Two jointly placed first place, and Myung was obviously one of the two. And the other one was Olonis. Olonis had also just finished his fight. 9 wins 0 draws 0 loss. It wasn't different from Myung's record. However, the difference was that Olonis won without fighting his opponent once. All monsters forfeited when they were matched with him. Olonis and Myung. Both will fight for their 10th win. Even if a Dakibi has won 9 times, he can't win against Olonis. Keek, that bastard, he's something else. If that Dakibi has a brain, he would forfeit as well. At the same time, it quickly became a hot topic of people's conversations. Myung and Olonis fight. It was highly likely that he would be chosen as the next opponent. However, this time, everyone was certain Olonis was going to win. Not one supported Myung. I haven't completely adapted to it, but not bad. By awakening, his body suddenly became stronger. It was obvious that it would take time for even Myung to adjust to the changes. In fact, if he did finish adapting, the fight with the ogre wouldn't have been difficult. However, it was also true that he was anticipating his fight with Olonis. It was a something he needed to overcome at some point. Just when Myung turned his head and looked at Olonis. Speak of the devil! Like Myung, Olonis had just finished his match. However, before having time to rest, they were chosen as each other's next opponent. Both their gazes entwined. And Olonis raised one hand. Forfeit. That Olonis did? No way. Is there really something with the Dakibi? Ha! Everyone in the audience got up from their seat. Olonis was the strongest in the arena. He was such a strong existence that all the monsters forfeited before they began the fight. But, for him to forfeit, an unprecedented situation had occurred. Myung was also surprised. He was planning on bracing himself as he believed Olonis was an opponent he needed to surpass. When he looked at Olonis again, his mouth started to move. This isn't the right place for us to fight. After quietly leaving those words, Olonis turned his body and left the arena. Chapter 77, Star of the Absolute, 2. TL, Yoni. Edited, Stealth. Myung slightly bent his eyebrows. By looking at the reaction around him, it seemed like forfeit was unprecedented. Also, there was no doubt in their minds that opponents of Olonis would either die or meet a fate similar to death. The guy doesn't know me. Olonis was a devil. The one who used to serve the third seat Vasago. Since it was unlikely for the demon gods, demon kings, and the transcendental beings to care about the current Myung, it meant that he was able to detect others' emotions no matter how weak they were. Curiosity. The desire to study someone else. Myung broke through his limits when he awakened. However, none of the monsters in the arena noticed Myung's change. After his awakening, there were times when his gaze reached Myung. It seems a larger stage is needed. It didn't seem like he was trying to avoid fighting him. If Olonis wanted to fight magnificently on a much large stage, Myung didn't have a reason to refuse. Rumors about Myung quickly spread. However, he received more attention by being the only Dakibi to get Olonis to forfeit. Is it true that Olonis forfeited? The reason for his actions was obvious. Even if there were Duoxinis, only a very few existed. Dakibis were monsters that just wandered on the edges of the land. It was amazing that Myung won all his fights, but no one thought that Olonis would forfeit. You're right. As Myung confirmed it, the old dwarf pushed his body close to the bars. The old dwarf was desperate. That was why he wanted to believe that was the case, but Myung denied it. The best way to get the 3 Pickaxe Sack Alliance to forge an equipment for him was to bring the old dwarf in front of him. If it was possible, Myung was planning on having the work done personally by the owner of the alliance, Bartas the God's Hammer. If Olonis kept avoiding him, there was no way to do that. No, starting from the second floor you could forcefully choose your opponent. If you refuse, you become a slave. By knowing his personality, he would rather die than become a slave. Myung turned his body to see if his current attitude was same as when they first met. Take me. If you truly want to kill him, you will need my help. When he looked back at the old dwarf, he opened his mouth again. His madness disappeared. If you are planning on fighting continuously, it is crucial that you maintain your equipment. And in terms of repairing equipment, there aren't many who can follow me. Please let me help you. Use the equipment I fixed to cut his head off. The old dwarf banged his head. Up until now, to obtain his services, many sweet-talked him but they were all liars. However, the Dakibi in front of him was different. If the weapon he worked on pierced through Olonis' neck, there couldn't be a more satisfying revenge. Actually, there are quite a lot of equipment that are losing their durability. Since Myung still had to fight at least a dozen times, it wouldn't be bad to receive some help. As Myung nodded, with a clank, the bars started to go down. It was the branding of a slave. However, let alone commit suicide, the old dwarf kneeled in front of Myung. His way of speaking had also changed. All it did was add force to the owner's words and made it so that they wouldn't be able to physically harm their owner. Afterwards, Kalmua's eyes sparkled. I don't need it. Kalmua made an odd expression. You fix and I fight. That's all you need to focus on. However, Kalmua smiled at Myung's cold response. Leave it to me. It wasn't a bad investment if he thought about how Kalmua was going to constantly use it. I need to see Kalmua's skills. It was creating something from nothing. It was only possible for very skilled dwarves. It seemed like he could wait in anticipation. Your armor is worn out. It only lasted this far because the skills of the person that made this equipment was exceptional. It wasn't strange for them to be old. Will you be able to repair it? Kalmua lifted his hammer confidently. Kalmua moved his hands at a consistent rhythm. It took about 12 hours to fix one. After a good 5 days, Kalmua with his pale face showed the repaired equipment to Myung. Amazing! Myung hadn't seen a lot of dwarves but among them, Kalmua's skills were good enough to be recognized as top class. In fact, the durability of a few pieces of equipment had actually risen. More surprisingly, the shadow armor had changed. Name, Shadow Armor. Classification, A-keepable type. Effect, by Blacksmith Kalmu, the equipment has been enhanced. Asterisk it allows you to teleport to a shadow within your vision 3 times a day. Agility +5 was a stat that didn't exist previously. It was something most experts couldn't do. Kalmu smiled as he looked Myung's expression. Myung left the 5th floor and headed for the 4th. It is possible to have up to 5 versus 5 fights on the 4th floor. Of course, you can fight alone but it's normally better to find comrades. But, you still need to watch your back. Even if they are on the same side, they can always betray you. He was a slave and would have had to follow even if Myung treated him like an object. Active, block. Active. A bit stronger. Bug. 3 people were with him. They were so well coordinated with each other that they were able to win the fight without many injuries. After leaving a short comment, he was about to leave. Oh, Olonis. Kalmua ground his teeth. On the other hand, his opponents were 5 male dark elves. The weak ones always say those words when they group up. They immediately surrounded Olonis when the fight began. As Olonis bared his teeth, the surrounding space was shrouded with a dark haze. And the dark elves were drawn into the floor. Myung held Kalmua's shoulder as he attempted to run into the arena. But... I understand. He knows how to use Spectre-type skills. But unlike the 5th floor, he felt like he could continuously watch Olonis fight on the 4th floor. Since the fight was already held back. It wasn't late to fight when he was more certain of his victory. Someone came to find them just as they arrived at their assigned room. Can we talk for a moment? Myung looked at the visitor as if this was unexpected. This person who had come to his room holding a cane while sweating was Bug. Chapter 78, Star of the Absolute, 3. TL, Yoni. Edited, Empty Cube. Talk. He hated when people beat around the bush. As Myung coldly replied, Bug gulped down his saliva. Then, I will get to the point. Please join our party. The reason is, isn't it better to fight with 5 people than alone? Currently, 1 spot is vacant. Myung thought over what happened a few hours ago. Bug and his other 3 comrades were stirring up the arena. It wasn't 5 people, but still that was enough. Their coordination was enough to call them veteran explorers, and they also had the fighting power to back it up. At the very least, they had 5 years of experience. On top of that, all 4 people seemed to have a distinct class. They should be able to easily clear the 5th floor and go to the floor below. You probably don't see me as a human. You are different from other monsters. And even Alice said okay. Alice. Ah, she's one of my party members. She is a master at detecting danger. She even has a support ability that allows her to recognize an opponent's habits or their fighting power. It was dangerous to just tell someone your companion's abilities. It was a gamble since he was exposing a part of his power. It just showed how badly he wanted to recruit him. The reason is, Olonus, we don't have the confidence we will win when we face him. You can just forfeit, can't you? See. We can't forfeit or lose even once. He replied very cautiously. Right away, Myung knew what Bug was talking about. They are aiming for Solomon's Hall of Fame. They were trying to break a record and earn a reward. They were thinking the same thing as Myung. However, there was a limited number of people who could leave a record on Solomon's Hall of Fame. It's better to do it alone. If he was to join these 4, it might be possible to overthrow Olonus. They were strong enough. However, if Myung joined them, Olonus would forfeit again and wait for his chance. Since he felt awkward coordinating with others, and as the conditions of the arena kept changing, he couldn't say how long they would be comrades for. I refuse. Please, think about one more time. You are really strong, but Olonus is stronger. Bug said it with certainty. It seemed like the girl called Alice had compared Myung and Olonus' fighting power. Is she a recruiter type class? Occasionally, there were special recruiters who could see how strong a person was. Fighting power was literally referring to the power Myung could produce using his stats and skills. Even after realizing and awakening his purity, he was still weak compared to Olonus. However, he never thought he would lose. Fighting power isn't everything. A fight was made up of continuous minuscule judgments. Even a small mistake could produce critical results. One's experience was the same or perhaps even more important than one's fighting power. Experience allowed you to reduce the number of mistakes to a minimum and understand your opponent. And Myung could be called experience itself. Few thousands or tens of thousands of fights were enough to make simply comparing stats invalid. I will not lose. Ha, I understand. It doesn't seem like I can change your mind alone. I won't ask you to fight as my comrade anymore. Bug let out a big breath. Myung joining them was like gaining a warrior who could do the work of 100 men. Although his other comrades opposed, Bug already knew that fighting power wasn't everything and that Myung was much stronger than what others thought. When he first met him, he disregarded him as he was a Dakibi, but after witnessing all his fights, his thoughts about him changed. He was strong. He was a truly strong individual who continuously got strong as he fought. His goal was to recruit him no matter what, but he had failed. Bug turned his gaze and looked down. Then could you lend us the dwarf for a moment instead? We will pay a price. As you can see, our equipment have become tattered. 20,000 ons. What? Per person, if you pay 20,000 ons, I will let him fix it. That's too expensive. Wasn't the price of that dwarf 50,000 ons? Muyoung shook his head. Kalmu isn't a slave but an expert blacksmith. If he concentrated and fixed the equipment, the stats of the equipment also increase. It was a benefit only the ones who gained his favor can enjoy. It meant Muyoung was willing to share this benefit. Kalmu was moved by the fact Muyoung said he wasn't a slave, and on the other hand, Bug couldn't help but be surprised for a moment. It was especially rare to find an expert blacksmith. They were normally part of huge guilds and only high ranks were able to use them. If they could even momentarily borrow an expert that great, the price wasn't a problem. On top of that, Bug thought that he could buy even a bit of Muyoung's favor through this deal. Gulp. Please wait for a moment. I will come back after discussing the matter with my comrades. Bug hastily ran out the door. Muyoung pondered as he watched him leave. Just in time. He lacked ons to buy the items Kalmu needed. 80,000 ons was enough capital. It could be used as a trump card when keeping Olonus in check. There was another reason for lending Kalmu to them. To keep Olonus in check, and if it was those four, they would fight well against Olonus, and he was planning on collecting data from this. Are you really okay with this? You might be fighting with them. I don't mind. Do your best. Muyoung was calm. If those four were monsters, no matter how much he needed the ons, he wouldn't have lent them this kind of help. However, all four of them were human. And when fighting against humans, there was no one who could catch up to Muyoung. Thump. They were the messages that appeared at the same time he finished off the wood golem. 15 wins 0 draw 0 loss. It was Muyoung's current record, and due to this, there was a bounty. Olonus is 500,000 ons. Even though our records are similar, it just shows how great Olonus' influence is. He was also famous on the 4th floor. It was because he had already competed in this arena a few times. From what he heard, it seemed like this was his 7th. There was no one who knew why he continued to participate in this arena. He received a reward as he continued his thoughts. About 700,000 ons. This was the amount he earned after 5 rounds. Unlike the 5th floor, the monsters on the 4th floor were more assertive. If the goal of the monsters on the 5th floor was to survive, the goal of the monsters on this floor was to escape. However, the escape ticket was a large sum, a staggering 1 million ons. So obviously everyone lacked ons, and perhaps it was because of this that another facility besides the arena existed. It was the market. At the market, everyone was a customer and a merchant. A place where people could purchase and sell items by setting them out and bargaining. Muyoung was walking around this place. Silver light cross ring 100,000 ons. Sooty battle boots. Selling for 200,000 ons. Unexpectedly, there was a constant supply of new items. People took items from the opponents they killed and sold them like this. The size of the arena exceeded his imagination, and hundreds of monsters died every day. That was why so many items were on the market. And Muyoung didn't miss a day to roam around the place to see if there was anything he needed. Normally, they are things that aren't worth buying. Almost 9 of out 10 items weren't in good condition. They were mostly worn or rusted. What was more, these items were expensive. Monsters knew this as well, but they were never willing to cut the price. Most monsters didn't understand the economy very well, and even if they knew it wasn't going to sell, they were still firm on the price. However, Muyoung had the blacksmith Kalmu. A treasure that returned equipment to their original state and with a low chance to increase their efficiency. The fact that both good and bad items are the same price meant that as long as a person has a good eye, they could profit. It was so. Monsters had very little understanding of the economy. They sold good equipment and the bad equipment at the same price. Those who didn't know would probably get ripped off, but Muyoung had a skill that could show the details of any item. Eye of the Sky. A skill that allowed him to use all the knowledge inside the Sky Library. There was an endless use for Eye of the Sky, which had become AC rank. Like now. Name, Old Earring. Rank, F. Classification, Equipable type. Effect, an earring so old that its abilities have changed. Be careful when putting it on, as you can get tetanus. Secret name, Contempt for the weak, A++. Secret effect, extorts vitality from a wounded opponent. It was possible to look at its secret name and effect. What was more, he was even able to know the original rank. A rank item that's also unique. Muyoung's pupils widened for a moment. A rank items that were identified as unique were almost non-existent. There were up to 3+S which indicated rare, unique, and epic respectively, and would display strong abilities relative to their rank. These were things normal recruiters couldn't see with their skills. It was possible for the Eye of the Sky skill that Muyong possessed, as it was a skill that contained all knowledge. Though even this would have been impossible if its rank was low, but the timing was just too good. I want to buy this earring. How much is it? Shik, it is 200,000 ons. An orc spoke without even looking at Muyong. There was no one in front of the stall. Who would buy an old earring like this for 200,000 ons? Even the orc probably thought that there was no way Muyong would purchase such an item. If he really bought it, it would mean he was crazy. And Muyong became the crazy guy. I will purchase it. Shik 200,000 ons. I won't reduce the price. Muyong shrugged his shoulders and took out a piece of paper. The orc nodded as Muyong wrote a number on top of a paper made out of special material. Muyong slowly held the earring. Contempt for the weak. I got a good item. If it was old, he just needed to repair it. He never thought he could earn such an item at a place like this. It was an earring he really liked after coming to this place for a few days. As Muyong turned his body and started to leave, the orc tapped his belly and smiled. He's a tool, a tool. Shik. Rumors about Muyong quickly spread. A tool who buys anything expensive. Many laughed at him for buying strange items whenever he earned ons. However, Muyong didn't care. Muyong wasn't the type to be swayed by such rumors, and unlike their remarks, Muyong was certainly gaining benefit. Guard of fresh blood, Sly God's sword, and contempt for the weak. Among them, he chose 3. No matter how great the secret names and the effects were, there were quite a few that originally didn't have good stats. So, the good equipment that Muyong could put on and use were only these 3. But, that was enough. Just with these 3, Muyong was able to gain quite a bit of strength. I shouldn't have been given time. Even inside the arena, Muyong was quickly getting stronger. On top of that, even his equipment were developing gradually. If Olonis decided to fight him on the 5th floor, he would have had much higher chance of winning. However, he gave Muyong time, and that would act as a critical factor. Olonis' chance of winning was slowly and continuously getting smaller. On the other hand, Muyong was steadily eating up everything from the bottom. Chapter 79, Star of the Absolute, 4. TL, Yoni. Edited, Empty Cube. Very good. After putting on the equipment he purchased at the market, Muyong nodded in satisfaction. He was overflowing with strength the moment he put them on. He could easily sense that he had become stronger. He hadn't expected much. The arena was helping Muyong develop beyond his imagination. This isn't all. He was on the 4th floor. He didn't know what new opportunities awaited him on the lower levels. Including the sword Muyong was holding, he took another look at the new equipment he purchased. Name, Guard of Fresh Blood. Rank, A. Classification, Equipable type. Endurance, 50,000. Effect, a guard made on the edges of the abyss. The owner is unknown. Asterisk stamina plus 10. Name, Wicked God's Sword. Rank, A+. Classification, Equipable type. Endurance, 45,400. Effect, a sword an orc lord known as Wicked God used. Asterisk only the ones awakened with fighting aura can use. Asterisk fighting aura plus 20. Asterisk the effectiveness of the cry of battle depends on your fighting aura. Name, Contempt for the Weak. Rank, A++. Classification, Equipable Type. Endurance, 25,000. Effect, an earring that reflects a wise and strong individual's authority. Asterisk only a keepable if the combined stats of both wisdom and intelligence are above 150. Asterisk magic resistance plus 30. When equipped with Conqueror's earring, magic resistance plus 50 and the skill the wilds can be used. The knee guard of fresh blood was a bit lacking compared to the other two, but the fit wasn't bad. As it didn't bug him when he moved, it seemed it would be okay to wear. Stats became harder to increase every time they increased by 100, but he basically earned 10 stamina for free. There was no reason to not wear it. Maybe it's because of the influence of Swordmaster, but I don't feel awkward holding two swords now. Muyong held both Anguish and Wicked God's sword at the same time. It wasn't like he didn't use two swords in the past when he was an assassin. However, he normally didn't use them and he only learned the basic fundamentals. But, it didn't seem awkward at all to hold both swords at the same time. Instead, it seemed natural as if he had practiced this for a long time. Though he couldn't perform as skillfully as he did with one sword, it was only a matter of time. Most of all, Cry of Battle. Among the options the Wicked God's sword had, a particular effect caught his eye. You could say that the Cry of Battle had an imposing effect. When a fight starts, Muyong's fighting aura would suppress the opponent. Those stronger than Muyong wouldn't be greatly affected by it, but it would have a critical effect on those weaker than him. Lastly, Contempt for the Weak, the set equipment. He had never heard of Conqueror's earring, but if he was to wear it with Contempt for the Weak, his magic resistance would increase by a whopping 50 and he would obtain a skill. Considering the fact that magic resistance was one of the difficult stats to increase, this was an amazing function. Even Contempt for the Weak alone increased his magic resistance by 30. Vitality Extortion. This was also useful. Vitality was basically the root of life. It was an energy that went beyond that of simple stamina and was needed for everything. Compatibility with Anguish seems good too. Anguish absorbed blood to recover his stamina. If Contempt of the Weak extorted vitality on top of that, it would produce a much stronger effect. Though the opponent needed to be wounded and living for it to work, but this was extremely compatible with Muyong. Every living being with this energy would have a very difficult time facing Muyong. With both Anguish and Contempt of the Weak, he would be able to turn the tables against opponents who were of similar strength to him. And when Wicked God's sword was included, he could even add pressure. The Cry of Battle would push the injured opponents to be defensive. Ha, you have an amazing eye for equipment. I didn't know until I repaired it. They were all made by experts better than me. Kalmo continued to show admiration. Most of the equipment Muyong brought went through the hands of the expert. Of course, he couldn't say everything was good, but at least they were worth the price. However, it is okay for you to use your ons like that? If you're not careful, sell them. What? You should definitely be able to sell these above the purchased price. They were simply items that were too lacking for Muyong to use, but many of them were of above average quality. If he sold them back, any monster who possessed even a bit of discerning eye would try to purchase them. Also, the ons Muyong earned from this would be of great help to him. It was what Kalmu desperately wanted. For Muyong to gain strength so that he could kill Olonus. I will try my best to sell them. And for that, Kalmu was even willing to sell his soul. Kalmu's eyes were blazing with determination. Not too long after, a message announcing the next match appeared in front of his eye. Familiar names caught his eyes. It was a message that announced the fight between 4 human explorers and Olonus. It's happening earlier than I had expected. Could the explorers hold Olonus back? Muyong also went to watch Olonus. If I know my enemy and myself, I won't lose. Before he assassinated his target, he always watched their every move. He was able to completely comprehend his target by watching and studying them. Even the little things. By doing this, he was able to see the opponent's habits and it became much easier to fight them. Even when he failed to assassinate someone and had to duel the person 1 versus 1, there were many cases where he won due to learning their habits. If he felt he couldn't win, he waited until it was possible. As he understood his target and himself all too well, he never failed in assassination. If it was an arena where he needed to face the person head-on, there would be more variables, but that was why he needed to observe them more carefully. Planning ahead and increasing the success rate to its maximum was the way Myung normally engaged in fights. The seats were completely filled. Everyone always paid attention to Olonus' battle. It was amazing that no one looked at him with a friendly attitude. He really doesn't die. Are we supposed to cheer for the humans? I never knew a day like this would come. Humph, humans are cowards. They are bugs that hide in a corner. Everyone ground their teeth as Olonus appeared in the arena with a beast-like presence. Still, everyone expected Olonus to win. It was a perfect example of monsters' impression of humans. And Myung agreed with them. Since it was true that humans didn't even enter the demon god's territory and were satisfied living in the remote areas of the underworld. He repeated the arena 7 times. However, Myung wasn't interested in that. Olonus. He, who already received a huge amount of attention, continuously returned to the arena and Myung wondered why. He must have re-entered the arena because he had a goal and he was still here since he hadn't accomplished it yet. It might be because his goal is to break through the last door. Myung couldn't think of anything else Olonus couldn't achieve in this arena with his fighting power. The last door. The place where Cerberus protected. It was a monster that was half a step away from the top. If there was anything that Olonus couldn't beat in the arena, it was that monster. Due to Wahi, Myung was already well informed on how to put Cerberus to sleep. I need to face it one day. If Olonus' goal was Cerberus, then Myung inevitably needed to face him. Even if it wasn't the case, he planned on forcefully choosing him and beating him once. And for that eventual fight, it was necessary to analyze Olonus. Myung's eyes looked towards the arena. The 4 people who faced Olonus. Among them, Bug spoke. Highest level of danger. We are going to engage thinking that we are facing a boss-class monster. Please maintain formation A. He was quite proficient in handling these matters. It was only possible as he was an experienced explorer. The 4 people immediately formed a line. Dear Soon. A man wearing priestly robes kneeled and started to pray. He seemed to be a follower of the cloud god, Soon, one of the gods the holy city Malalan served. Soon, a thin cloud formed and slowly wrapped around the 4. Clank. Afterwards, a warrior with a huge shield took the lead and stepped forward while hitting the floor with his shield. Behind him, Bug and a girl with a bow slowly approached Olonus. It's a well-organized combination. The 4 people were really well coordinated. Their setup was also flawless. The blessing of the cloud continuously recovered their stamina and healed their wounds. It also had an effect that made the opponent's attacks sluggish and even cast out curses. It was a formation that was well optimized for fighting one opponent. On the other hand, Olonus aimed for their side from the start. In a blink of an eye, he went through them and attacked their priest. He seemed experienced in one-to-many fights. It seemed like he instinctively knew who he needed to target first for the fight to go smoothly. Active. A bit faster. Clash. However, Bug accelerated the warrior's movements. Olonus' attack was blocked by the warrior's shield. Soul Language Sorcerer. Like the name, it was a class that allowed him to freely attack and defend. He was able to use various fighting tactics. Bug was able to cover the weakness of their sides. Olonus lifted his hand after realizing it would be hard for him to simply go through them. Then, a countless number of hands stretched out from the floor. Dear Soon. Please summon the cleansing rain. The clouds that wrapped around them started to rain and dampened the floor. The small hands instantly became oxidized as the rain made contact and their movements became sluggish. Clap. Olonus clapped his hands. Countless hands combined and inflated. Dodge. Crash. 5 large, 10 m tall hands of specters were created in the arena. The hands moved and stubbornly aimed for the 4 people. Even the cleansing rain couldn't do anything about those 5 hands. When he moves the hands, he becomes defenseless. However, there was a disadvantage. Olonus couldn't move. Swing. A completely frozen arrow drew a line as it flew out. Ping. It instantly froze a hand the moment it made contact. Active. A bit stronger. Bug placed a spell on the warrior's shield. Afterwards, the warrior nodded his head and flung his body towards the frozen hand. Clash. With the sound, the hand crumbled in pieces and for the first time Olonus frowned. You guys are quite good for humans. Aren't you too weak for a devil? From what I heard, devils were so powerful that they could crush few mountains by themselves. Bug provoked him. In reality, he had never seen a devil. Devils normally lived very deep inside a demon god's territory. They had never shown themselves besides at the start of the war. On the other hand, humans settled in the land they had. What you say is true. I will now show you the real deal. Olonus grinned. At the same time, his forehead split open to reveal an eye. The eye that appeared after shedding tears of blood was very big and gave off a chilling aura. Once that eye appeared, the flow of the fight completely changed. As if Olonus was able to see the future, he was unfazed by any attack and the laser from his eye destroyed everything in its way. Cough. In the end, it even pierced the iron shield. The warrior's left arm flew off. Since the warrior, who guarded the front, collapsed, the rest was a matter of time. The expression of Bug and the rest of the group quickly turned bad. FO, forfeit. Damn it. Everyone who holds a sword against me dies. Bug forfeited, but Olonus lightly disregarded him. Unless he forfeited before the fight, he needed to leave the arena to stop in the middle. However, Olonus wasn't planning on stopping the fight. Instead, Olonus raised his nails. In a blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace and aimed for the priest. Ah! Bug let out a shout. His movements were a lot faster than what he had shown them until now, so they were late in stopping his attack. We should have just forfeited. It was the price for fighting in such a difficult match because they were blinded by greed. By the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late. The priest's death was determined. Clang! That moment, a sword stopped Olonus' nails. Olonus thought it was odd and raised his head and looked at the opponent who appeared. Stop! The one who appeared was Muyong. He had entered the arena using shadow teleportation. Chapter 80, Star of the Absolute, 5. TL, Yoni. Edited, Empty Cube. It was against the rules to interfere with an ongoing battle. If no penalty existed, there couldn't be a fair fight in the arena. It seemed they were lenient since it was his first time. However, it couldn't be helped. To be 100% certain of my victory, I need to save them. Muyong found the way to win against Olonus. Bug and his colleagues possessed the decisive key to winning. He's similar to me. The way he fights, his habits, everything. Muyong couldn't help but be surprised as the fight intensified. Olonus was too similar to Muyong himself. At least, in terms of fighting. He was careful and had the ability to find the best route of attack. They were even similar in the sense that they both used spectre-like skills. Amazing! His senses, judgment skills, etc. How could he be this similar to him? The more he looked at it, he couldn't help but laugh. It was as if he had a mirror in front of him. Of course, there wasn't even a big difference in fighting strength. Especially the existence of that eye that appeared in the end was something Muyeong needed to be cautious about. Winning ratio 5:5. Before seeing the eye, the chance he would win was higher, but with the appearance of the eye, it balanced out the difference. That was why the slightest difference would have an effect on the victory. And for that, he needed to save them. Dakibi, why are you siding with humans? Olonis ground his teeth. He was currently agitated. His 3 eyes were dyed red. He did his best to suppress his urge to attack. It's for my victory. Muyeong didn't hide the truth. Olonis was too similar to Muyeong. He couldn't really believe it, but it was true. That was why he didn't feel the need to hide his true intentions. Especially since lies wouldn't work in front of the third eye on his forehead. The place for our fight isn't here. That isn't something that you decide. Muyeong held Anguish and the wicked god's sword. He showed a strong determination that he was going to continue if Olonis wasn't willing to stop. While doing this, he turned his head halfway to look at Bug. Bug, who realized Muyeong's intentions, quickly got up, supported the warrior and grabbed the warrior's arm that flew off. Thank you. This debt, I will surely. Bug and his comrades escaped the arena as fast as they could. Soon after, from afar, tens of living armor appeared. While looking at them, Olonis mocked him. It's such a moving scene. As expected for a guy who smells of Gremory. Muyeong's brows moved as he heard the unexpected name. Gremory. The one who held the 56th seat of the 72 demon gods, the only demon goddess, the one who ruled over 26 demon armies. And Muyeong currently had the qualifications to become the 27th demon king under Gremory. Olonis looked at Anguish after reading Muyeong's expression. I know that sword very well. I also know the owner of the scent you give off. As the subordinate of that traitor bitch, it's beautiful how you side with humans. Traitor? It was a remark where he couldn't find a speck of respect for demon gods. However, Muyeong pretended as though he knew nothing. I don't know what nonsense you're speaking of. Are you pretending that you don't know, or do you really not know? You're the first one that I can't easily read with this eye. However, it is clear that you are related to that bitch. He bared his teeth. The power of traitors are small. You started a fight you can't win. That means no matter how many people like yourself make an effort outside, it's all meaningless. And once everything is settled, the humans you sided with will all walk the path of destruction in an instant. Muyeong was slightly provoked by him as he talked, but he remained calm. Even if he was a bit surprised, he made a conclusion that it would be dangerous for him to act as if he knew what Olonis was talking about. As Muyeong continued to be non-responsive, Olonis turned his body as if he lost interest. After all, you're also aiming the place beyond the door the Cerberus protects. Me for my honor, you for your own use, we are searching for that item. The place for us to fight is there. Afterwards, Olonis left the arena as if he had no regrets. As Muyeong watched him leave, tens of living armors surrounded Muyeong. Everything was blocked in the cell. It was extremely cramped and it was even difficult to breathe. Since it was made out of an unknown material, it was hard to smash the wall. It wasn't impossible to get out of this place, but he didn't find it necessary. When everything is settled, the demon gods will start to move. By settle, does that include the power associated Gremory? However, it was better this way. No matter how cramped and uncomfortable it was, Muyeong wasn't restricted by the location. If normal monsters were locked in a place like this, they would show all kinds of symptoms of mental disorder, but Muyeong had already overcome those things in the past. On the other hand, he gained time to slowly think things through. In 10 years, the great calamity started and the demon gods attacked the humans. However, not all demon gods participated. Including Gremory, few demon gods didn't appear from the start. He didn't even have to think 10 years later. When humans first entered the underworld, demon gods did not actively attack them. At most, the demon kings made their move. However, what if there was a reason why all the demon gods couldn't leave their territory? Was there an internal conflict? And did that conflict resolve within 10 years? Perhaps they made their moves after the conflict was resolved, which led to the start of the great calamity. Myung's heart started to beat a little faster. The demon gods also have factions. No one knew. Of course, they didn't know. There would have been no way for humans to know if the problem amongst the demon gods was solved before they started to make their move. He couldn't be certain. However, all possibilities were open. I need to ask Olonus directly. Myung nodded. He was certain he could ask Olonus after beating him. Myung knew how to find out what he wanted to get in the room beyond the door the Cerberus was protecting. Myung calmly sat. He quietly concentrated and drew a picture in his mind. Moving your body isn't the only way to train. More realistic imaginations than reality. Myung prepared for all the moves as he drew the fight with Olonus in his mind. Asterisk. After 3 days, he was instantly matched with a fight as he left the cell. Myung stretched his body before heading for the arena. Thank you. On his way, Bug was waiting for him. He was also with his comrades and everyone had their heads lowered. They were hopeless and embarrassed, but it was true that they did receive help from him. They didn't know how to act and just had their heads lowered. Myung didn't really help them to receive thanks. He only helped them because he wanted something. The price for reckless actions is death. You were lucky this time. We know. If it wasn't for you, we would have all died. Thud. As Bug tapped the shoulders of a comrade beside him, his comrades said a word of thanks to Myung. Even the guy who was pale. It was the huge shield-bearing warrior who stood in the front lines and had his left arm cut off. Even if they had a priest, it seemed like the blessing of strength didn't work for him. This was because Olonus' power of evil was much greater than the experience level of the priest. However, they felt something much better than the pain and sorrows of losing. You want revenge? Bug widened his eyes. He roughly understood what Myung wanted to say. Are you willing to work? No, I will fight alone. Instead, I'll give you a chance. However, Myung shook his head. Instead, he took out a talisman from his side. And after he shook the talisman, 2 undead appeared in front of them. The Black Sun warrior in full armor and high dagger stood stiffly before they kneeled. Undead. Clank. Everyone was alert as the undead suddenly appeared. They held their weapon and prepared themselves. Since they were humans, living beings, it was a natural reaction. Myung spoke calmly. Strengthen these 2 by using the blessing of the cloud and soul language. You know how to use Order Bless, right? Order Bless was a high-rank blessing. The strength that allowed a strong reflective power against specters and the dead. The priest shook his head. It's impossible. With my skills, that much. However, Order Bless was a blessing that could only be used when few priests combined their strength. Unless you were a top-ranked priest, it was impossible for someone to do it alone. Myung chuckled. You should be able to with Bug's soul language. Your soul language seemed to be different than normal. A stronger power. I could feel Draken's energy. How did you know? Bug's eyes widened. Draken was a half-dragon. A draken born from a dragon and a different species could use dragon language. They manipulated a language a class above the normal soul language. He didn't know at first. It was a truth he found out after awakening his purity and watching Bug use his powers. If he didn't find out, he wouldn't have saved them. Even your name, Bug, is a lie. Since the dragon language is so strong that the user even needs to hide their true name. The difference I felt continuously was because of this. The tips of Myung's lips slowly went up. From the first time he met him and heard his name, he felt something was different. Most soul language users were famous, but it was odd that he never heard of his name before. However, if it was the dragon language user, the story was different. Bug was beyond astonished as he had an expression as though his soul was drained out of him. Are you still going to say it's impossible? Also, with the power of the dragon language, it was possible for the priest's prayer to be helped. Priests could produce a power a level stronger than before. Shortly, Bug admitted. It's possible. However, even if we could use Order Bless, we can't apply it on undead. For now, you can't. Myung turned his head and looked at the arena. A completely white monster known as an Arc Troll was waiting for him. Arc. It meant it had quite a lot of resistance to darkness and light, and if he was to transplant its heart in Heidegger, it would be able to handle Order Bless. The Black Sun Warrior already had a strong resistance to light. On top, if the power of fire which Myung had was added, it didn't seem impossible. Wait for me. Myung walked up by himself. His eyes sparkled. I realized you and I are alike. It should be meaningless to hide any further. The third eye Olonus possessed could understand all of Myung's strength. Myung also understood Olonus' true power. Since it meant it was pointless to keep hiding his strength, he was going to try his best. Blaze! Wings of fire sprouted from Myung's back. Cry of fire! It was a skill the blazing spear soldier used, but Myung had taken it from him using soul exploitation. However, the flame was much more intense than when the blazing spear soldier used it. Quickly and overwhelmingly. If up until now was a warm-up exercise, from now on, he was planning on being a rough typhoon that will destroy everything that blocks his path. If it was pointless for him to hide his strength from Olonus, he was going to make him be alert by showing his true strength. Olonus would become more cautious and careful after attempting to understand Myung, and those exact actions would be his downfall. As he was narrow-minded and Myung knew how to use everything. This small but critical difference would change the results.